Hi there. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brad, and just in a minute or two, we'll be starting this month's webinar. Appreciate everyone that's dialed in. Hope your Tuesday has started off well. I do have a welcome page up on the webinar now, so you should be seeing that on your screen. If you do not, please press *0, and an operator will be happy to help you. We're going to get started just in another minute or so. In the meantime, you should know that everyone is muted, so don't worry if you are eating a sandwich. This is lunch hour for some of us, so go right ahead. And also, there is a chat on the right side, and that is private as well. So feel free to type something into there. I'll be asking you some questions throughout the webinar, and know that no one else is going to see what you put in. So if you have questions, all questions are welcome, and appreciate your comments in the chat pane. At the end of the web conference, I will have my contact info down so you can copy it down there, and also be taking questions privately. So if you'd like to wait until the end, that's a possibility as well. So with that, it's now 5 after. We've got a ton of material to go through, so let's get started. And I'm going to give you just a brief introduction, and then we'll talk about a variety of different things in terms of how to assess opportunities, both from a new opportunity and revenue perspective as well as from a departmental perspective. Try to do everything. It's kind of jamming a lot into one session, I realize, so we're going to fly through some of these things, a couple different acronyms that we'll talk about. So if you want to only participate in one section, this is kind of how we'll review things. So feel free to come and go. Just about me real quick, I am the president here at Adigo, and this was kind of a funny topic for me because it brought back memories from over a decade ago, kind of aging myself. But back when I was director of products at Voyant, I was charged with, cut, and they had between 3 and 5 new products that they had started that really shouldn't be there. And that's what this webinar is really all about. How do you avoid that when everything looks good up front? I've also started a number of businesses, and so as you can imagine with that, there's lots of business plans and financing, and that's just all about assessing opportunities and trying to prioritize. So first of all, why should we assess? Why not just go for it? This is, for some of you non-football fans, this is the age-old Hail Mary pass. Just put it up there and see what happens. Apple is notorious for producing just a huge amount of the revenue from products that didn't even exist 3 years ago. I don't know what a new stat on that is, but that's what it was a couple of years ago. And then 3M, they're really the gold standard for having a very systematized, consistent approach to new product development. So they do it really well. Business schools typically study their process. And then, of course, every startup, everybody knows that as long as you're in a startup, it is always making tremendous money, and it has a hockey stick projection. So, why do we even need to bother when everybody knows just have a new opportunity and it produces a gold mine? Within departments, kind of the same thing. In IT, there's always a new tool that is coming out that you have to have. Engineering, in particular, software code and languages are changing so rapidly that there's always a new development software that you need to get. And then, if any of you are in marketing, share with me in the chat pane what functional area you're in and what your new opportunities you're potentially looking at, and we'll try to address those. But within marketing, things are changing so quickly. You've got, of course, Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and now SlideShare and pin interest and all these other things. And so, there's always a new tool to help manage all these other tools. And so it seems like we're inundated with trying to get the latest and greatest. And, you know, I did have to mention that when I was doing this slide on the title there, I left out one of the S's at the end, and then that told me, you know, exactly why we have to assess. Because if we leave off an S, that's the problem. And, you know, here's the typical scenario is that, you know, you've got this new cool idea, and, you know, the next thing people think about is, well, how would we build it, you know? And then before you even know it, you've got some skunkworks project going and making some kind of prototype, because we all know speed to market. So let's see how we build it and see if we can make it happen. Or there's some new tool and application, and all of a sudden, you know, we just can't live without it. So, you know, how fast can we start to use it? And the problem with that is, well, are we stopping to take a, you know, think about who is going to buy this, and really how much are they willing to spend, and therefore what will we even make? And, you know, then ultimately, will it even be worth it? And of course, that's where the rubber hits the road. And unfortunately, what many people find is that just doesn't happen, and you get all this inertia, and you get these pet projects, and before you know it, there's a lot of emotion around some of them, and they're just kind of running down the hill on their own time, and there's just never enough time to, you know, really do the due diligence up front. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So first of all, what should our criteria be? And, you know, if you're a VC-backed company, then the criteria is typically revenue. And if you look at, or just, you know, audience size, maybe not even revenue if you're Twitter or Groupon, right? If you're a Fortune 500 company, then they often talk about strategic type of initiatives. And, you know, strategic to me, I think just means learning. And, you know, why not just go to college if you need to learn? You don't need to do a huge project to get strategy and things like that. For most of us, most companies, it really comes down to margin or profit, however you want to describe that. And ultimately, because there's an investment required, it's really the return on your investment. And it's funny to me that personally, you know, tell me in the chat, what do you expect when you're financing? You know, everyone typically has, you know, maybe a 401k or some kind of savings, and they, you know, you definitely want some percentage rate. So shoot me in the chat and tell me what your personal ideal value is, because most of us have one. So I'm seeing a variety of things, and interestingly, in the corporate environment, people typically do not think that way. And why is that? Why, as individuals, do we want to have a good rate of return, but corporately, we don't always think about that? And that's strange, I think. So what happens is there's often just not enough forecasting up front. And when we say forecasting, we don't mean estimating. You know, that's kind of throw a dart at the dartboard kind of approach. And the other thing is it's not a CAGR. That's, you may hear that acronym. And that, tell me if you know what that stands for. If you do, we'll send you a Starbucks card after the webinar. But that is not an effective way of forecasting in most cases. So what we really want to go after is a formulaic model. That's the old-fashioned way. CAGR, as Tanya looks like put in with the correct answer, is compound annual growth rate, and that produces that hockey curve or hockey stick curve that people are familiar with on that previous slide, where everything just looks rosy. And if you do it with a formula, you're going to get much more accurate information. And the classic case that didn't do this was in the business school days of the 90s, everyone looked at Boston Market. And their projections, when they went public, people started to kind of peel that onion and look at them. And to hit their projections, they had to have over 12 cash registers per store. And most had 3. So basically what this was telling people was that it was virtually impossible, even if they had constant customers in line, they couldn't process enough transactions to hit their numbers. And that's because they just didn't do their forecasting correctly. What really the appropriate way to do it is ASP, which is your average selling price, times the quantity, and times the number of customers. And typically, most customers, B2B especially, are going to have different types of customers purchasing different quantities and at dramatically different prices. And so you have to do this a number of different times for those different number values for each of these. And it seems a little complicated, but really it isn't. So let's go through it in a little bit more detail. We'll take the easy ones first. And I know I'm going quickly, but trying to cram a whole bunch of material into just the 20 minutes. So first of all, price. And a lot of times, with new opportunities, you think you've got something brand new, and gosh, sometimes people want to spend a lot of time on, price elasticity and, what's the right pricing to put. And really, it doesn't matter too much. Just find some type of comparable or benchmark. And even if things are, what I like to describe as apples and oranges, totally different. Well, you know what? They're both fruit, and so, if apples are already out there and you're selling oranges, yeah, they're totally different, but, pick a number and maybe it's a 15% premium, but ground it in some kind of benchmark or comparable. Secondly, let's deal with quantity. Again, sometimes people will do all kinds of research, and yes, that's important, but really you want to get down to a few things. Is it a single or a multiple item purchase? Is it a one-time purchase, or is it going to happen over time? And, the classic example of a consumable type of purchase is a razor blades. And, of course, everybody wants that type of product or opportunity or service, and that's just not always possible. But ideally, that sure would be nice. Lastly, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit more complicated, is your customer. First, identify your channel. Is it direct? Is it a dealer? Is it a representative that you're using? Because that's going to determine quite a bit. And let's talk about that in a little bit more detail, because I think this is one of the most important slides we have in terms of how to assess opportunities. And really, what is going to be the big determinant is your number of customers. And often this is where people do not correctly forecast. And part of it is because of this TAM, SAM, SOM. And if you've heard of this, let me know. It'd be interesting to get some different perspectives. But TAM is total addressable market. And often people say, well, gosh, this is such a great product, and, there's 100,000 businesses that could use this, and we only need 1%, and gosh, that's already 1,000 customers. Well, that's kind of not too accurate, because really what you need to identify is what's not the total market out there, but what's your addressable market? What's the possible demand for your product of companies out there? That might only be 10,000. And then when you segment that market, what part of that market are you actually going to serve? Because you're not going to serve all ends of the spectrum. You're going to have a very segmented part of the market that you're going to serve. And then finally, what's your share of the market? And that has to do not only with your product, but your company. If your company is set up with only 4 registers, that determines how many transactions you can have, using our example before. Or if you've only got a limited number of staff, that will determine how many transactions and customers you can service well. So it might be that you can only have a share of the market that's 10% of your total addressable market, and that might only be 10% of the total market out there. So this, I thought, was a nice way to look at that, and this is thanks to Caroline Cummings. So appreciate that, and I've got her link down there at the bottom, and if you need that for future, I'll be able to email that to you after the webinar. So this is a really big topic. You could talk for half an hour on this alone, if not more. I know I only spent a minute, but we're going to keep moving on. But this is the variable that's going to change over time. And when you're looking at a new opportunity, you have to look at a 24-month time frame. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But most of what you should be researching here and doing your forecasting on is how you're going to change your customer reach and identifying a greater percentage of your sum over those 24 months, because nothing sells itself. And so your activities have to be sales-oriented in identifying how you will get more prospects. And you should start at the bottom with your assumptions and find out, calculating upward, what that is going to result in. And I'll talk about that here in just in a little bit more detail. So there's lots of different ways for you to approach your market and how you can identify these prospects. And this is what you want to spend time with, and identifying which are going to have the biggest impact, because these are going to be what's called your leading indicators on producing that revenue and ultimately that return on your investment. So typically there are going to be 2 to 5 variables, and it's critical that you can control them, that have the biggest impact. It might be the number of salespeople, it might be the number of resellers carrying your product line, but it's not going to be visitors to your website, and it's not going to be downloads, because those are things you cannot control. And the buzz in the market, hey, if you're Groupon, great, that is important. But for 90% of the companies out there doing new opportunities, that's not what's going to make or break your investment. So make sure you're looking at things that you can control, and then identify the ones that have an impact. And that's what is involved in what's called a sensitivity analysis. The way you identify the impact is by plugging in a best case, a very optimistic but realistic value for those things, and then a worst case, pessimistic, not, earthquake, but, things didn't work out exactly as you wanted. Plug in those two numbers, and you'll find that in some cases it may not have much of an impact on the overall revenue. And that's okay, and that's fine. But some are going to matter a lot, and those are the ones that you really want to focus on. And that is what's critical. So what do you do with those? Well, first of all, you want to forecast out and make your projections for at least 2 years. Some people talk about 5 years. I think that's just overkill, because so much changes by that time. 1 year is just not enough, and things don't get off the ground in only a year typically. So 24 months and projecting in 3-month increments is really a key area. And what you're trying to do in this initial period, sure, it'd be great if you hit all your revenue numbers, but really the most important is to prove out those key assumptions that we talked about earlier. If you're talking about a departmental initiative, what's the equivalent to revenue? It's expense reduction. And that might happen because of productivity or some other activity. But again, make sure that you've identified those key assumptions that are driving that expense reduction. You can still do the same sensitivity analysis, and it will be just as critical. In the interest of time, I'm going to really speed through these next couple of slides, but taking into consideration your resources is critical to any assessment. There's lots of risks that could be involved, such as cash flow, of course, or technology. You could have technology risk if you're developing something new. If you've got partners and suppliers involved, as most of us do, that's a critical item as well to really make sure you've got a good handle on. And then, of course, is timing. And it's always going to be late. So just count on that, and count on if some of your key assumptions are late in getting implemented as well, what effect will that have? Lastly, well, not lastly, but another important issue is opportunity costs. What will this mean that you can't do? That's just as critical. And will it distract you from your core business currently or something that's going on in the department already? often you only get, one, what we say is at-bat or two, and so you got to make it a good one. And that's why you never, sometimes people want to take advantage of this window of opportunity, but you really never know what's going to be just around the corner, and it might be even a better opportunity. And also, a critical thing, especially for more established companies, is the culture. And what's your buy-in? Who's the champion internally, whether it's in the department or at the executive level, if this is a new product? Don't underestimate the importance of that, because likely there'll be a power shift. If things don't go well, who's going to take the fall? That's something very important to consider. Most importantly, again, talking about new opportunities and what's around the corner, don't look at things in isolation. Always have three things at least that you're comparing. I like to call it a rack and stack, and that will help you decide which is going to be the best one that has the highest ROI, because one might seem great and have just a nice gut feel, but it may not be actually the best one that you should do. Key takeaways then, what are we going to base our decision on? Profit. How are we going to identify that? We're going to forecast, not based on a compound annual growth rate of a very conservative 5%. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to base it on formulas of key assumptions that we've identified that have the biggest impact. And then we're going to project things for 24 months, identifying things every 3 months and checking in halfway in between at a 6-week cycle. And we're going to be very realistic on our opportunity costs. Lastly, hey, rack and stack those opportunities. Make sure that you're comparing different opportunities and choosing the best one. And remember, it's definitely okay to pass. So I know that was a quick run through. I appreciate everyone's attention. Please let me know if this was helpful. I won't take it personally, so don't worry about that. But I would appreciate some feedback. Again, chat that into the pane and let me know if this was helpful as a 5 or not so much. Just give me a 1. And if you've got questions, you can type those in as well in the chat, and I'd be happy to take people offline right now. What I'll do is I'll put music on into the conference, and if you've got a question, you can send me that chat and your phone number, and then I can pull us offline and try to answer any questions that people may have. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and again, appreciate everyone's time.